Tom was laboring over fresh test data, a tedious yet essential task for him and his team's month-long effort on the test vehicle. Despite its dullness, he found himself correlating and tabulating the information for analysis. Mid-task, his phone buzzed with a text notification, but he paid little attention to the sender's identity. Only after a pause in his work did he glance away from the screen and notice the alert. Curiosity piqued. He picked up his phone, revealing an unfamiliar number with a local area code. Though tempted to dismiss it as spam, he reconsidered, wondering if it might be a colleague's unregistered cell number. Upon opening the message, his initial confusion turned to shock as he found an explicit image displayed on his screen. It took a moment for him to process the unexpected content. A close-up of a woman's private parts, clearly showing recent ejaculation. Reading the accompanying text, "Look closely. You still have time. Bradley's, 6 p.m. He initially dismissed it as a misdirected attempt at solicitation, finding a hint of amusement in the situation. However, a closer examination of the image revealed a tiny detail that froze him in disbelief: a mole near the woman's private parts, unmistakably belonging to his wife, Tonya. Doubt flooded his mind as he desperately sought to disprove what he saw, but the evidence only strengthened his conviction. Questions raced through his mind as he recalled Tonya's supposed whereabouts, en route to Boston for a crucial work engagement. Yet, here he was, confronted with an image that suggested otherwise. With the clock ticking towards 5:15 p.m., the timing of the message clashed with Tonya's scheduled landing in Boston at 4:30 p.m. Although she typically checked in upon arrival, it seemed plausible that she was preoccupied with her team's arrangements. Despite the whirlwind of emotions, Tom opted to reply to the text first, before considering further action. Not particularly original, but entirely expected. "Who is this? How did you obtain this image? Am I expected to meet you at Bradley's?" As he prepared to wrap up for the day, he made a firm decision to head to Bradley's. He was determined to get answers one way or another, sending a text to Tonya. "How was your flight? I'm going out for a bite. Give me a call when you're available." He aimed to keep things low-key and gather information discreetly. Walking toward his car, his phone buzzed once more. Assuming it was Tonya, he checked his phone, only to find a response from the mystery sender. "I'll be there, but I'm sure you'll find someone more interesting than me." Feeling overwhelmed, he hurried to his car while checking the map on his phone. Bradley's was 30 minutes away, and it was already 5:40. He'd arrived shortly after 6 p.m., uncertain of the importance of timing, but hoping he wouldn't miss whoever the texter expected him to meet. During the ride, his phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Tonya. "Crazy time with the team. We'll call you later before bed. Love you." He pushed thoughts of their conversation aside. His focus was on his meeting at Bradley's and the mystery surrounding the texter's knowledge of his wife. Arriving at 6:12, his heart raced as he parked. Since the texter hadn't provided any clues about who to look for, he assumed whoever wanted to meet knew him and would approach him. Yet, it was the mention of someone more interesting being present that troubled him most. The texter seemed privy to information he didn't possess, and he feared walking into a trap without any other means of uncovering the truth. The image of his wife's carnal parts left him in turmoil. He trusted her completely, and their closeness was satisfying, or so he thought. But the only explanation for someone possessing such an image was troubling, and he was minutes away from discovering the truth, a prospect that filled him with dread. Stepping inside, he allowed his eyes to adjust to the dim lighting. Unfamiliar with the pub's layout, he paused by the entrance to survey the surroundings. A spacious dining area lay ahead, with a bar to his left. Choosing a seat near the end of the bar, he ordered a draft and scanned the dining area. His attention was drawn to a man who had just taken his drink order and was making his way across the room toward a table of smiling individuals. And there, at the table, receiving a drink from the well-dressed man, sat Tonya, adorned in her little black dress and pearls, her smile radiant. He moved mechanically, advancing toward the table where Tonya sat. Just a couple of steps away, her expression shifted from a warm smile to wide-eyed fear upon seeing him. Undeterred, Tom continued, reaching the table and seizing a handful of the well-dressed man's hair with his left hand. He yanked back forcefully, causing the man to drop his drinks and stumble backward, yelping in pain. As Tom pulled him past, he released his grip, intending to strike him with his right hand. But the man's rapid retreat left Tom out of range, and he landed on the floor before Tom could act further. Taking a step toward him, Tom recognized Pete and sternly warned him to stay down. Pete, disheveled and soaked in drink, obeyed without uttering a word. Turning back to Tonya, Tom noticed the table had fallen silent. Familiar faces stared back at him, members of Tonya's team, who had shared meals and gatherings at his home. He mused that team loyalty outweighed betrayal, except for one individual who had chosen to reveal the truth. Briefly considering identifying them, he dismissed the idea as futile. Tom informed Tonya that he was going home and suggested that if there was any hope for their marriage, she should come with him now. Tonya nodded in response. However, before she could rise, he gestured for her to wait and requested a moment. Before departing, he addressed Betty Wilson and Bob Thornton, seated nearby. He asked Betty if Bill thought she was in Boston, and Bob if Alice believed the same. Their avoidance confirmed his suspicions. He pondered whether the whole team was involved, realizing that at least one of them was. The drive home was a blur, ending abruptly in his driveway. Inside, he grabbed a beer and sank into the living room, contemplating his acquaintances. Familiar with Bill Wilson and Alice Thornton, but unfamiliar with the other couples present. With uncertainty gnawing at him, he debated contacting Bob or Alice, but ultimately decided against it. Instead, he sent them a brief message. Just heard Tonya's travel plans changed. Might want to touch base. With that, he left the choice of further investigation in their hands, feeling a sense of closure amidst the chaos. It was roughly 20 minutes later when he heard the garage door open and Tonya pull into the garage. He waited in the living room. She entered, still dressed in her LBD, but without the provocative pumps and jewelry. As she calmly walked into the living room and took a seat opposite him on the sofa, he remained quiet, understanding the power of silence in any conversation. He was resolute in allowing the silence to persist for as long as necessary. It didn't take Tonya long to speak up. "It's not what you think," she began, but he gestured for her to stop. "You have no clue what I think about tonight's events," Tom replied. "I don't need a detailed explanation. We're both engineers, and we know that there's no real or objective answer to any why question. It's often just an attempt to justify unfavorable outcomes, so I won't ask why. Let's start with something simpler. How long? How many times? How frequently? Do our friends know, apart from those at the table who cheat? Am I labeled as your betrayed man among your work colleagues and our friends?" "No, Tom, it's not like that at all," Tonya protested. "Our team's travel plans got disrupted, and instead of coming home only to travel again tomorrow, Pete suggested we stay in town for a down day before resuming." "I didn't see the whole team there. Where was everyone else?" Tom inquired. "When we received the news, some of the team chose to stay home one more night and meet us at the airport tomorrow," she admitted. "But you chose to deceive me," he pointed out. "You seemed rather close to Pete. Is there anything happening between the star engineer and the Wunderkind program manager that you'd like to tell me?" "Well, for one, Pete's all right, and he persuaded the owners at Bradley's not to press charges," she said in a positive tone. His eyes widened in utter disbelief at her loyalty. "I couldn't care less about your colleague. If he hadn't tripped, I would have punched him. Whether charges are pressed doesn't faze me. I've spent a night in jail before. It's irrelevant. Besides, it could make for interesting testimony," he added with a half smile. "Do you love him?" Tonya paused, gathering her thoughts. He could tell she was contemplating. Yes, silence was indeed a powerful tool, and his mind raced to fill the void in their conversation. Again, this didn't seem like it would end well. "He's not my boyfriend. There's absolutely nothing between us. Yes, I should have informed you about the change in plans, but it seemed trivial. Whether I was in town or Boston, you weren't expecting me, and I was still committed to the team. We were simply having dinner before retiring to our rooms. There was no reason for you to act the way you did. You completely embarrassed me in front of my team," she exclaimed, attempting to bluff her way out of the situation. He unlocked his phone, pulled up the text, and pushed it across the coffee table to her. Judging by her expression, he could tell she recalled the picture and the situation, leaving no room for denial. This time, she started speaking without bravado. He retrieved the phone, started a voice recording app, and tucked it into his shirt pocket. "Tom, Our team is, she hesitated, searching for words. Very close-knit in many ways. Most of us, she began. We have a small group that meets regularly. They were all at Bradley's. We were the ones putting in extra effort for the proposal. You know the time I've spent preparing our pitch? I don't know exactly when it began. It was sometime after Pete became PM. We worked closely together and I was drawn to him and things just evolved, Tonya explained. No explanations needed, he interrupted. Falling into bed doesn't just happen. Decisions are made consciously. We both understand that, so please don't insult me. So, almost 6 months, he answered one of his questions. That's when Pete joined, right? She nodded. The team, he continued. All of you. He trailed off without naming it. I mean, collectively? She nodded again. Pete mentioned it fosters trust and team unity. Is that what convinced all of you to form a company coalition group? Now you're being crude. It's more than that. I feel a strong connection to Pete and my team, more than ever, Tonya asserted confidently. He sensed trouble brewing. Unfortunately, you may see some changes in your team soon, Tom warned. What did you do? Tonya gasped. Tom, involving others will only cause more damage. Let them make their own choices. We need to focus on us. Tonya, I can't stay silent and be complicit. I care about Bob and Alice. In fact, I like them a lot more than Betty and Bill right now, he replied. I texted them about the changed plans. How they handle it with their spouses is up to them. I can live with my decision. Tom, we have the most productive team in Cramerica Inc.'s history, she practically yelled at him. And you benefited too. Just because our team meetings were on Wednesdays didn't mean you missed out. I never denied you access to me whenever you needed it. So, I slept with my team a bit earlier. You never noticed. That picture you showed me, you want to know about it? She sneered. That was right after Pete finished inside me. Yes, he came inside your loving wife. What you don't see is Betty. She took the picture just before she went down on me. So now you know you never had seconds or tasted another man's seed. If you don't know, it didn't happen, right? Tom listened in shock as the extent of the deception and his own ignorance unfolded before him. Now just because you're aware, just because your fragile ego is bruised, you want to throw away all that my team and I have achieved? Tonya hissed, her anger escalating. Tom could feel his heart rate rising as Tonya passionately defended her team's questionable dynamic. His own anger was growing by the second. For a fleeting moment during his drive home from Bradley's, he entertained the idea that perhaps forgiving Pete just this once could be possible. However, that notion had quickly met its demise. He didn't need to hear any more, and he certainly didn't want to, but Tonya persisted. No, sir, we won't let you off the hook. You're going to text Bob and Alice back, informing them that you heard from me and that we were stranded in Atlanta but have reservations for the morning. That's the story Betty and Bill will stick to, and you're going to support them, damn it, she shouted. There are millions on the line with this deal, and your hurt feelings mean absolutely nothing. Send the text, and then we can discuss our next steps. Discuss our next steps? Tom retorted. There's no discussing it. You're leaving. Now, you and your twisted team, including your ringleader Pete, can carry on however you like. We're finished. I'll be contacting a lawyer this week to get the ball rolling. It's a straightforward 50-50 split. You keep your retirement, and I'll keep mine, Tom declared. But go. You have reservations in town. Use them. Head off to Boston and chalk up another victory for you and your team. Tom, please send those texts, Tonya pleaded, her tone much softer now. If we lose Betty or Bill before the presentation, the company could lose millions. You and I could miss out on tens, maybe hundreds of thousands in commissions and bonuses. Just imagine all the places we could go with that money. Just you and me. Forget about this and reclaim my loyalty. Please, Tom, don't let some irrational concern about meaningless encounters derail us. Pete says I'm on the fast track to executive status. All I have to do is keep delivering results for a few more years. Don't you want that for me? For us? She implored. Tonya, just leave, Tom managed to say before he was struck hard in the back, knocking the wind out of him as he fell to the floor with a knee pressed into his back. Don't hurt him, Tonya interjected. Too much, she added. So still undecided about breaking my nose? Pete taunted as he leaned in close to Tom's face while Tom lay pinned on the floor. Tonya must have a bug, Tom thought. Now I know whose team she's really on. We'll see whose nose gets broken, Pete smirked. Get his damn phone and type those damn texts for him. We don't have time for this nonsense." Someone pulled him up from the floor. Just one individual. He pretended to be injured, causing the person behind him to exert significant force to assist him to stand. This provided him with necessary information. His captor was a weak office worker, wheezing from the effort to get Tom on his feet. Tom was catching his breath after being taken by surprise and was refocusing on the situation. In contrast to Pete and his team of well-groomed salespeople, Tom's team operated in the field with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, SOAR, based in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Although his group of engineers didn't match their caliber, spending time with the crews during test missions led to the team being invited to improve their physical condition under the guidance of seasoned workers flown to missions in aircraft modified by Tom's team. If these men appeared at your doorstep, it meant the end of your days on Earth. Tom and his team designed the equipment necessary to access and, more importantly, exit hazardous locations. They took pride in their modifications, contributing to successful missions and the safe return of all involved. The members of the 160th and their formidable passengers deeply appreciated the hard work put in by Tom's crew, with Master Sergeant Troy Baker standing out as the most intimidating figure. MSGT Baker was renowned within his community. Everyone, from recruits to high-ranking officers, showed him the respect he deserved for guiding his men through missions worldwide. He was known for never leaving anyone behind. This reputation was solidified during a mission in Colombia. MSGT Baker instructed the young LT platoon leader to stick close. During their first mission, when the FARC ambushed their group, MSGT Baker thought the LT was performing well for a rookie until he saw him on the ground bleeding from a head wound. The medic reported that he had checked for vitals and mentioned that he was gone top. Baker knelt down and lifted him into a fireman's carry, with the medic reiterating that he was gone top. Baker responded to the medic's observation, stating that it might be true, but he was still coming home with them. The medic looked at him as if he had lost his mind, considering the more than 5-kilometer trek back to the LZ through dense forest. They would be fortunate to return unscathed, but carrying a deceased individual seemed like a risky decision. Anticipating the medic's thoughts, Baker assured him, "I'd do the same for you, Billy. Stay close in case I need you." What ensued became legendary. Upon their return to the base, the medic informed the doctor that the LT had succumbed. The doctor nodded and retrieved a penlight from his pocket. The medic watched in amazement as the dead LT's pupils contracted in the harsh beam of the penlight. The doc then asked the medic if he cared to revise his diagnosis as they hurried the revived LT into surgery. He was timeless. He didn't speak much, but when he did, everyone listened. He was a relic. In an age of convenience and disposability, he was neither. He was meticulously crafted and unique, and he seemed to hold a special regard for Tom and his team. During the extended periods of downtime between missions, the MSGT expressed his gratitude by instructing Tom and the team in some basic yet effective hand-to-hand defensive techniques. He advised the engineers, "It's better to know something, just in case. I understand the biggest threat you're likely to encounter is a malfunctioning copier or a nasty paper cut, but if you remain in this line of work, you may find yourself in some colorful locations. So, now if you happen to encounter one of the local colorful inhabitants, you'll have something practical to rely on," MSGT Baker explained to the group. "But let's hope a paper cut remains the scariest thing you ever have to face." Tom regulated his breathing and allowed himself to appear subdued in the grasp of his captor, while recalling the fighting techniques taught by the MSGT. There might be situations where you feel powerless and can only endure the smacking. It's unfortunate, but it happens. The key is to remember that even when you're taking a smacking, you can still fight back. You just have to outsmart your attacker. Tom remembered the lesson and subtly resisted, gradually wearing down the lone man's strength. "Give me the phone, Tom," Pete demanded, staring him down. "Now you know I've been with your wife and that every guy on the team has had their way with her. Forget this tough guy act, Tom. You're nothing but a weak, submissive nerd. Do as we say, and maybe you'll still have a chance with Tonya when the team isn't using her. Don't forget about all the luxuries you can afford with her bonus. That should ease the pain. Who knows, maybe Tonya will even buy you a cohesion robot for those times when she's busy. Tom bit his tongue as Pete took pleasure in humiliating him and coercing him into compliance. Pete demanded to know where it was, spotting the outline of the phone in Tom's shirt pocket. He then reached for it with his right hand. Tom forcefully stepped back with his right heel, striking his captor's shin and causing him to stumble in pain. Flexing his arms, Tom broke free from the hold as his captor yelped and collapsed under his own weight. Pete's eyes widened in recognition. With his right arm extended straight out, Tom rolled his shoulder as taught by the MSGT, driving his clenched fist into the center of Pete's face with full force. He felt bones shatter beneath his fist as a gush of blood poured from Pete's nose, sending him crashing to the floor. He turned around to identify his assailant. It was Bill, lying on the floor in tears and clutching his leg. He whimpered that he thought his foot was broken. Tom forcefully stomped on his foot, causing Bill to scream in agony. Tom remarked that it should clear up any uncertainty. Turning his attention back, he saw Pete on the floor, hands covering his face, attempting to rise to his knees. Approaching him, Tom leaned in close to his ear and mentioned that it looked like his nose took the punch, adding that he wasn't willing to take one for the team. He then delivered a powerful punch to Pete's temple, knocking him out cold. His adrenaline pumping and breath ragged, Tom scanned the living room for Tonya. Suddenly, he felt a sharp impact to his back and neck. Dropping to one knee, he spun around to confront the new attacker. Tonya stood before him, wielding a cast-iron skillet. Her swing missed, grazing Tom's side. Rising to his feet, he roughly grabbed the pan from her hand. Tonya pleaded with Tom, expressing that they could still salvage the situation. She asked him to consider the money he would be giving up and promised to put an end to the extramarital affairs, vowing to cut them off. She suggested going back to how things were between them. Rubbing the back of his head with his left hand, Tom stared at her, astonished by her sudden transformation. He compared her to the shape-shifting alien in John Carpenter's The Thing. Adapting to each new challenge, he smirked at the thought. Misinterpreting his smile as agreement, Tonya moved to embrace Tom. He held her back with his left hand, then, after a brief moment of consideration, swiftly struck her nose with his right hand, fracturing bone but not rendering her unconscious. Tonya cried out and slumped to the floor. Tom remarked that it hurt like hell, describing tears streaming, vision blurred, breathing labored, and blood everywhere, stating that it worked every time. Tonya expressed her distress, questioning Tom's motive for punching her. Tom, unapologetic, explained that he struck her because he had the ability to do so. He continued recording the incident, convinced that he had enough evidence to justify his actions, despite the potential negative portrayal. Reflecting on the advice received from the MSGT about decisive action, Tom surveyed the room, noting Bill's distressed state and Tonya's attempts to stem the bleeding from her nose. In motion while others remained still, Tom acknowledged the success of saving someone, giving credit to the MSGT. Discussing the aftermath, Tom expressed frustration about the consequences for Lover Boy and Mr. Bill, lamenting the missed opportunities and potential financial losses. He contemplated the implications of involving the police, deciding to delay the call to maintain his chance to question Tonya. Kneeling beside her, Tom demonstrated how to address her nosebleed, but as the adrenaline subsided, he felt a sudden loss of energy, sitting across from the woman he thought he knew. Questioning her actions, Tom wondered about the true extent of Tonya's deception, expressing disappointment in the betrayal. He inquired about her aspirations, specifically regarding her ambition to become a vice president. Tonya admitted that it could have been worthwhile if Tom had gone along with her plans, expressing regret for the setback caused by the incident. Tom pressed further, questioning the future of their relationship and the persistence of deceit, to which Tonya acknowledged the possibility and the potential continuation of dishonesty. Tom discovered from Tonya that Pete had warned her about his rigid ethics and idealistic views, advising her to break free from his influence to achieve success. In response to Tom's question about when Pete conveyed this advice, Tonya retorted, insinuating his lack of knowledge about certain aspects of her relationship with Pete. Despite Tom's silence, Tonya continued, sharing her perspective on career advancement. She revealed that adhering to Tom's suggestions for career enhancement yielded only a few commendations, and it wasn't until Betty offered guidance, that she learned what truly worked for women in the workplace. Tonya asserted that engaging in carnal relationships for career advancement was not only effective, but also more enjoyable. Tom, still recording the conversation, processed this information. Curious about the timeline of Tonya's actions, Tom inquired if her involvement in such activities began before Pete entered the picture. Tonya, expressing impatience with Tom's comprehension, disclosed that she initiated such actions at the company's Christmas party a year after joining Cramerica, emphasizing her commitment to this approach ever since. "Wait, you're sleeping with the boss too? Art? Art Vandelay?" Tom asked incredulously. "Yes, Tom, Art, Pete, Bill. Anyone on the team who could help advance my career. It doesn't cost me anything to share some closeness, and it's easy to manipulate you men when I can lead you around by your desires, especially you. Show a bit of cleavage, and I could guide you wherever I needed," she stated. "Even now, thinking you have it all figured out. We informed Art of our location when we headed here. Right now he's gathering the rest of the team, crafting a cover story for our absence. They'll have to make the pitch without us, but the extra effort with their purchasing managers should pay off." "Do I really want to hear this?" he wondered. "Oh, what the heck, why not?" "Extra effort?" Tom prodded. "You always were a go-getter, Tonya." "It was so easy. I hate to even call it effort," she laughed. "What's the old joke? The worst closeness I ever had was great? At the bidders conference, it was straightforward with the men. We had to get a bit more creative with Brenda, the token woman on the selection board. It's funny, I can even seduce a woman, but I did throw in old Pete over there as the kicker. She was situationally bi-curious. As I recall, her situation cleared up about the same time my tongue began lapping at her. With promises of more to come when we started working together after the contract award, yeah, we have the selection board covered." "Why all this then? I mean, if it's all set up, why the strong-arm tactics?" Tom asked. "That was Pete's idea, the idiot. I told him to cool off, that I would come home and please you and be back in time to catch the flight, but he had to go all alpha. Look what that got us. So now, instead of being the face of the winning team, I'm back to dealing with Art. Like I said, fixable, but it will set me back." "You wouldn't have bought me so cheap," he said. "Maybe not," Tonya replied, "but I still would have made the flight." "Well, you sure as hell ain't making that flight now," he declared. Remembering how Pete seemed so clued in, he figured Tonya must have a transmitter. "Art, are you listening? I'm about to call the cops. I'm sure there's a handful of felonies involved here, and we haven't even begun to go down the rabbit trail of fraud. That's a federal contract, isn't it, Tonya?" Tom asked rhetorically. "Yeah, the feds take a dim view of how, did you phrase it, extra effort? I'm sure you have great lawyers and all, Art, but maybe there's an alternative?" He let it hang. A moment later, Tonya's cell phone ringtone played, "Hail to the chief." "Art?" she asked into the phone. "Of course. I'll put you on speaker." "Tom?" Art's voice came through the speaker. "First, let me apologize to you. Pete's actions were a gross lapse of judgment. I can assure you the board will deal with him assertively." "Thank you, Art. That eases my mind. Glad to see that you and the board take assault and fraud seriously. Tom, these are all unfortunate allegations. Lawyers will profit, but nobody wants to rock the boat. We might pay a fine, Pete and Bill get community service, but ultimately you'll be divorced and half as wealthy," Art explained in a businesslike manner. "Do I detect an OR in this story, Art?" Tom inquired. "Tonya always said you were the cleverer of the two. Still, I'm happier to have hired Tonya." "Yes, Tom, there most decidedly is an OR," Art continued. "Tom, we, Cramerica, have displaced you in your wife's affections, and when you found out and questioned it, you were treated most shabbily." "Most shabby. Shocking," Tom chimed in. "Tom," Art continued, "instead of calling the cops, as you put it, suppose we could come to an agreement. I just sent a snap to Tonya's phone, not me, one of my tech boys here. They tell me they disappear after viewing. Have a peek. Perhaps that might restore some goodwill." Tonya opened the snap and turned the phone to Tom. He saw the words, "Bank of Grand Cayman," and a number. A very large number. "And when would that be deposited?" Tom asked. "It's already there, Tom. You have an email with the account number. This has been a very bad day for you, Tom. This may be a hard decision for you to make, and I don't discount the emotion. Tonya is a very desirable woman. Be that as it may, however, One can't take emotion to the bank, can one? One can't, Tom agreed, affecting Art's upper-crust clipped manner of speech. Kramerica will cover the costs of your divorce. You can never reconcile. I think we all recognize that. Tonya will file. She will ask for her personal belongings and her retirement. He thought for a moment before replying. On the one hand, he could stand on principle and expose the whole sordid mess and let the chips fall. On the other hand, he could just walk away. Art had just given him 5 million reasons to do just that. Does Kramerica have a medical staff, Art? Tom asked. Yes, Tom. I believe we have some physicians on retainer, Art replied. Good, Tom said. You better load a few into a limo and send them over here to pick up your team. Are we in agreement then? Art asked. Tonya who? Tom replied. Precisely, Art agreed. Are we done, Tom? Art asked. Goodbye, Art, Tom said and ended the call. Tom put his phone away, turned off the recording app, and slipped it back into his pocket. I knew you would see it our way, Tom. We can still be friends with benefits when this is all over. She summoned up what she thought was her most winning smile, but even her incandescent smile couldn't reverse the effects of her ruined nose. Her eyes were turning black, and the blood was crusted under her nose, dried drips down to her chin. Tom found the sight comical and allowed himself a smile. Once again, Tonya misread his smile for agreement and leaned in to kiss him. Tom extended his right hand to halt Tonya, using it to gently push her back until she landed on the couch with a thud. Expressing disdain, he questioned the notion of wanting to kiss her, leaving Tonya hurt and looking up at him. Declaring his decision, Tom insisted that she remove whatever she wanted by the next day. Walking toward the door, he stopped beside Bill, inquiring about his injured foot. Dismissive of Bill's complaints, Tom kicked him in the groin, causing Bill to curl up and moan. Approaching Pete, who had managed to sit up, Tom assured him he wouldn't physically damage him. Pete, relieved, smiled, but it quickly vanished when Tom's foot applied pressure to Pete's groin. Rolling onto his side in pain, Pete watched as Tom exited the room. He got into his car, unsure where he was going, but food and shelter were high on the hierarchy of needs scale for a good reason. He grabbed a burger from a takeout place, checked into a Red Roof Inn just outside of town near the freeway, and fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Despite enduring numerous physical strains from various injuries, he rose early the following morning and reluctantly got out of bed. While preparing motel room coffee, his phone chimed, and he eagerly grabbed it. The text message came from the number, and he opened it promptly. Sorry for yesterday. I can meet. TGIF at the mall, noonish. I'll wave you over to seats at the bar. I'll be there, he replied, and poured the lukewarm brown water from the coffee maker carafe into the paper cup. With determination, he set up his laptop, gearing up for some online banking. Reflecting on his college days, a time predating his relationship with Tonya, Tom recalled his economics professor's advice to maintain an offshore account for unforeseen circumstances. With his professor's assistance, he established a bank account in the Cayman Islands, which he fondly referred to as his go-to-hell fund. Over the past decade, he diligently contributed to it, and now he boasted an impressive sum of close to $50,000. Tom felt a sense of pride knowing that his go-to-hell fund was about to receive a significant boost. Tom accessed the secure website for each bank. With his passcode and several keystrokes, he transferred the bulk of Kramerica's payment into his personal account, leaving $100,000 in the original account. After a shower, a change, and getting ready, he headed out to meet the mystery texter. Tom entered TGIF just past noon. As he entered, he noticed a man waving him over. The man appeared to be about Tom's age, well-dressed and handsome. Tom approached him. I believe you sent me a text, Tom said as he sat down. I'm sorry for how it turned out. I don't know if there was any clean way to tell you. The stranger began. Why don't you start with who you are and your connection to Tonya? Tom replied. I was on the team. I left the Army after 8 years, wounded in action, and had a lengthy recovery before being medically discharged. I joined Kramerica about 6 months ago and was assigned to Pete's team around 3 months ago. While talking to a friend about the job, I mentioned working for Tonya. When he asked for her full name, we realized we had a mutual friend, and he asked me to watch out for Tonya as a favor. At first, everything was great. I was warmly welcomed to the team. It didn't take long to find out why, he started. About 2 months in, Tonya approached me. She is extremely attractive and, compelling. But when I asked her about her ring, she just smiled and told me you were okay with it. I wasn't and said so. That started the deep freeze. After I turned her down, I got all the undesirable assignments and nothing but grief from Pete. I called our mutual friend back and told him about Tonya approaching me. He told me about you and thought that pimping your wife for pay seemed out of character for the man he knew. He believed there was more to it than Tonya let on, and that you needed to know. Pete sent me the pic when they were trying to get me on board with the team, kind of a prize I could expect if I went along. Let's just say I don't agree with their methods. I resigned yesterday and sent you the text. Our friend? Tom asked. Troy Baker. If I hadn't met Troy, he replied, then paused a moment before continuing. Let's just say he helped me out of a scrape when I was a green LT. I owe him a favor or two. Don't we both? Tom agreed. What are you going to do? The stranger asked. Art pretty much laid it all out for me. I could get the cops involved, and yes, Bill, Pete, and even Tonya would face legal problems. But with his lawyers, it would all end up as a bump in the road. We made a deal. You might think I'm selling out, and maybe you're right in a way. But they stole the only thing I had that was irreplaceable. If I can't make them pay legally, well, at least I can make them pay. It won't bring Tonya back, but I think I may find she's less irreplaceable than I thought. I have a trip planned. Tell Troy thanks for everything. I won't be going back to work. What about you? Tom asked finally. Well, Troy always spoke highly of Baxter Inc. Now that you're gone, they might just need another engineer. I think you'll find they do business a bit differently at Baxter. Maybe more to your liking. Challenging, but the fringe benefits won't compare to what Tanya's team was offering, Tom smiled. Expressing his acceptance of the arrangement, the stranger stood up, prompting Tom to do the same. With a simple nod to each other, they left without exchanging any further words. Fast forward to Monday, Tom had just completed the check-in process for his flight to Costa Rica. As he contemplated the upcoming relaxation in Tamarindo, he headed towards security. Spotting a mailbox, he pulled out an envelope from his pocket addressed to the DOJ in Washington, D.C. Containing a thumb drive with the recording, he thought it might pique their interest. Considering the possibility that Art's legal team might not be as formidable as assumed, Tom dropped the envelope into the box before proceeding into the security line. Update. 9 months later, seated at his usual table in the cafe, Tom received mail from Anna, who brought him his cerveza. Thank you, dear, he said, raising the bottle to his lips. Holding the envelope, he wondered who had found him. Not going to great lengths to stay hidden, finding him in a little town on the Pacific coast of northern Costa Rica would have required resources beyond the ordinary guy's reach. His first thought was that Art's people had found him. Letting the envelope sit at his house for 2 days, he was fairly certain it wasn't a bomb, yet you can't be too careful. Carlos, Tom called out to the cafe owner. Tienes tus cuchillo? Sí, Señor Tom. Tom handed over the envelope and stepped back a few paces. Can never be too careful, he thought as Carlos cut open the envelope. He handed it to Tom, who thanked him, took another pull from his beer bottle, and turned the envelope over. Several sheets of paper fell onto the table, picking up a note that said, Thought you would find this interesting, along with a phone number. The number, Tom thought. Troy would have the resources to find him. I can live with that. Flipping the other piece of paper over, he found a copy of a newspaper article with a picture. The photo depicted Pete, Bill, Tonya, and Betty being led out of the Comerica building in handcuffs. The headline for the article read, 4 indicted in multi-million-dollar procurement fraud. He smiled. Maybe Art's lawyers aren't everything he thought they were, he said to himself, a habit he picked up since his Spanish was weak and English wasn't widely spoken. He liked to hear English conversation even if it was just him talking to himself. Ana, otra cerveza, por favor, he said, holding up his empty bottle. Sí, Mr. Tom. Gracias, Ana, he said as he accepted his beer, took a swallow, and looked out at the deep blue Pacific. Tonya who?